But we want to start right now with it's kind of a like one of those conversations where you're like, how did we end up here type of conversation. So U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has now ordered diplomats to return to using Times New Roman font in official communications, laid down the law. If you're going to be typing, which all of us do on a regular basis for the State Department, you have to use Times New Roman. Charles Nix, who is Monotype Senior Executive Creative Director, is joining me now to talk about the personalities behind fonts that we use. Thank you so much for your time.
It is my pleasure, Anita. I live in a very sort of rarefied place of font obsession, so it's great to have somebody to talk to about it.
Font obsession. I don't know if there's many of you, but clearly this is a thing. This is a thing. So I was today years old, as the kids say, when I learned that this was a thing. All right, so what are your thoughts on Times New Roman?
I think Times New Roman's a classic typeface. It has a long pedigree that sort of dates back to the earliest days of Roman typefaces. Although it was created in the early 20th century by the Monotype Corporation in London for the London Times newspaper. It's so rugged in its construction that it's really stood the test of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, Marco Rubio, Secretary Rubio, is not the first to say, hey, I want a standard font for everyone within the State Department. Antony Blinken switched to, is it Calibri?
Yes, it is Calibri.
And I probably know it when I see it, but don't say that often.
Precisely. I think this is the case with a lot of typefaces. I constantly am asked how to pronounce Neue Helvetica and Bodoni and lots of other typefaces that people see in font menus but don't necessarily, say out loud every day.
Yeah, exactly. So when we're going to type something and it comes up, you just go with, well, oh, this looks nice, I'll use this one. You don't really know the name of that font and especially how to pronounce it. But why do you think it would be important to someone to have a standard font for an entire department?
Well, I mean, this goes back to even pre-typographic times. Under Charlemagne, the monk Alcuin sort of standardized the writing system, which is the sort of basis for all the typefaces that we use, including Times Roman. And it was a way of organizing a sort of brand identity for the Holy Roman Empire. And so brands do it every day. We help guide them, and they sort of publish their brand guidelines, and people try to adhere to them so that the voice that you're hearing, the visual voice, is the same throughout the brand. And so the U.S. government and other governments are no different. They, establishing a unifying typographic voice is a way of indicating to somebody that this is the same group speaking to you. This is a person from a larger group that's speaking to you.
But with something like Times New Roman, I'm thinking, it's so common.
It is so common. And I think the conversation here between Times New Roman and Calibri is very much about the contrast between them and less about the sort of uniqueness of the typefaces. So Calibri is a sans-serif typeface, which means it has no feet. And Times Roman is a serif typeface, which means it does have feet. And one is seen as a sort of much more modern, contemporary representation of typographic form, and one seen as a more traditional one. Both are equally legible, but it's the connotation of the form that I think is being concentrated on here. In terms of legibility, which is the ability of something to be read or comfortably read, they're about the same, but it is what people are used to reading that makes a typeface more or less legible. So I think if any of us looked at our phones or any screen that we're surrounded by daily, most of the type on those screens is going to be sans-serif typefaces. So we've become very accustomed to seeing type in sans-serif on screens, and so therefore it's more legible. In printed documents and books, serif typefaces dominate. It's just, I don't think many of us can remember ever picking up a novel and seeing it set in a serif typeface. So printed books, the expectation is that those typefaces will be serifed. So it makes them much more legible in that circumstance. But by and large, people are able to read both equally well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Secretary Rubio says this is to restore decorum and professionalism. What does our font say about us? The font that we choose, what does it say about us?
It's a great question. I say that fonts are our visual voices, and for a brand or for a company, a typeface is actually speaking even when you're sleeping. It's something that's sort of carrying through its form the ideas that that live on top of the message that you're sending. So to put that in another way, I mean, what I'm saying to you right now in any other voice would be different. My voice is uniquely mine. And if we choose a typeface with intention, it conveys something on top of the actual language that we're reading. It's a sort of invisible gauze or visible gauze that exists between the intention of the writer and the reception of the reader. So that moment between two brains receiving information, and type lives at that place. So how we shape that moment actually has an impact on the way that people receive the information.
This is such a deep dive I did not expect to have today. Or ever.
Ask a font nerd.
Yeah. So apparently Calibri was chosen because there are some people with certain visual disabilities who can see it better. Is that right?
There were a number of reasons cited in the original movement towards Calibri a couple of years ago under Blinken. The first was clearer letter forms. So, and again, you can find some evidence that, especially on screens, that typefaces like Calibri promote ease of readability. There was another aspect of it at that time that had to do with the ability not only of people to read the text, but the text itself to be read into readers. And I'm going to unpack that. I'm sorry, it sounds really convoluted.
You've gone way over our heads.
Some people who have trouble reading or have seeing can take documents and feed them into an OCR machine, and it will speak the words to them. Mm-hmm. And in those machines, it was easier before recent developments for them to read sans-serif typefaces over serif typefaces. So it was a dual intention. One, to sort of capitalize on the simplicity or simplification of the letter forms in a typeface like Calibri, and two, to make sure that the devices that were reading out text to visually challenged people were more accurate.
Do we have all of the fonts that we'll ever see, or could a new font still be developed?
No, everyone has a voice, everyone has a point of view, and there are new typefaces being developed all the time. And with the introduction of generative AI and artificial intelligence more generally, we're about to see an explosion of typefaces, I imagine, that will rival anything that we've seen thus far. And right now we're living through a time of typographic and font plenty, the likes of which we've never known in civilization ever. The closest corollary is at the beginning of the 20th century, when there was a big explosion of typefaces, again thanks to type technology. The beginning of this century saw the same thing when we introduced digital tools into typesetting and font production. And now with AI, I'm just imagining an incredible plenty of new typefaces that will be developed in the next 5 to 10 years.
I have to know, what did you study in school?
So, my checkered past begins with being the son of a printer. I grew up in Akron, Ohio. My father was a printer, and so I was around type from a very early age. And I studied art and design at the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art in New York City. And there I met a lot of people who, well, quite quite a few people who are interested in typography, but a few experts who really changed the trajectory of my life by letting me know that there were people who actually made typefaces for a living and who were typographers. And I knew at that point that that's what I wanted to do.
I have talked about the interest rate cut, property taxes, all different types of things today. And my mind may have been blown the most from this conversation.
When I'm in Chicago, you and I can get together and I'll try and diagnose what typeface fits your voice, Anita.
You know what? That is a promise that I hope you will keep. I need to know which one fits me specifically.
You got it.
All right. You take care. Oh, there's something, everyone has their thing. I love, finding out the thing that people are passionate about. And even if it's not what you're passionate about, it's just interesting to really understand what it is, learn something new every day type of mentality.